Wednesday passed without news of the reincarnation results. By Friday, Diego still hadn't called. He didn't respond to my messages either, which was odd. Maybe I had no match, but if so, why not just tell me? If I was going to show off my holographic disc at the potluck that night, I'd need the results that day, but I woke up to a dozen messages about a potential new resident wandering the city. So instead of pestering Diego, I went to the East Gardens and settled onto the bench I called my office to watch for the newcomer. Once I'd finished orienting him, then I could go ask Diego about the results. I fielded a couple of small mediations, but put off larger requests, knowing that I'd have a half-day commitment at least to get the new arrival oriented once he found me. If he found me and didn't give up and storm off first. A thread on the Otra Vida channel listed the fun people were having with him, the nonsensical directions and fictional warnings they like to give any outsider. Newcomers and visitors to Otra Vida were rare. To get here in the first place was a trick. The paved road from the closest highway terminated suddenly in the middle of Death Valley, and the real route to the city was little more than a couple unmarked tire ruts. The GPS pin was in the wrong location, and someone always put it back in that wrong spot whenever an outsider tried to fix it. Once through the gate, Otra Vida had no signs, our labyrinthine pathways and pedestrian streets unmarked and unmapped. After watching for an hour, I spotted a man in jeans and a black t-shirt. The clothes alone gave him away. Otra Vida residents tended toward lighter weight fabrics and brighter colors, often made of a thermal thread, which transformed hot air into a cool breeze, a literal lifesaver in the extreme heat of summer. Even on this early March morning, it was already close to 80 degrees Fahrenheit. We lived in the hottest place on an overheated planet, after all. I crossed my legs and adjusted my red broom skirt as I leaned on the arm of the bench, chin in hand, watching someone give him yet another bogus set of directions. When Sunil pointed back the direction he'd just come, the newcomer threw his bag on the ground in frustration. Sunil offered him a jovial pat on the back and moved along. He swiped his bag from the ground, and our eyes met as he stood. I reached an arm high in an exaggerated princess wave. He glanced suspiciously around, then headed my way. "Are you Galacia?" He pronounced the middle syllable wrong, Galacia rather than Galacia, but if he stuck around, he'd hear the unusual name enough to correct himself eventually. "I might be," I said. "What do you need her for?" "You're in charge here, right?" He wiped sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. Thick black hair stuck up as if he'd been rubbing his hands through it. Not really. But if you need help finding a place to stay, I'm the one who can get everyone to stop jerking you around." "That sounds like being in charge to me." He wouldn't hold my gaze for more than 2 seconds at a time, so I decided he'd be more comfortable side by side than face to face. I patted the bench beside me. "Sit with me for a moment?" He sat, fidgeting with the bag on his lap, glancing between me and the blooming Joshua tree across the pathway. The bag looked new, with no patches or stains that might give clues about his history. I handed him a glass bottle of cool water. He sniffed at it for a second before downing the whole thing. "What's your name?" "Zachariah Pike." His eyes darted to me before he added uncomfortably, "Ma'am." "Okay, Zachariah," I said. "What do you think you'll find in Otra Vida?" He said, I heard you don't have to work up here, that you don't have to pay bills or taxes or worry about getting kicked out of your apartment." I said, "Partially true. Why does that appeal to you?" The story he told was typical. He came from a family that had been fractured and displaced by burned forests and flooded streets. He'd gone to university because that's what you do, and had been living off of California basic income since he graduated. Basic was hardly enough to cover basic needs, though, and left a lot of people hustling in highly competitive and unreliable gig work, or working for the Cascadian smugglers who carried drugs and data across borders. Or for a brave few, venturing out into the desert in search of the oasis we'd built. I watched Zachariah for nonverbals and listened for clues in his communication. He was mid-20s, and he continued to avoid more than brief glimpses of eye contact. The skin around his cuticles was raw. Both the skin picking and the eye contact could indicate that he was on the spectrum, but from his speech patterns, I suspected it was nerves. His story sounded rehearsed, peppered with a lot of, and right endings, indicating a strong need for validation. He might have a hard time adjusting to our lack of hierarchy. After a while, I stood and waited for him to follow. If I kept listening to him, I wouldn't have time to visit Diego. Let's get lunch started and then I'll show you around. I led Zachariah through the meandering paths of the East Garden, past a fountain that sprayed a pleasant mist, and onto the main pathway that looped around the entire lake, kept cool by large fabric shade sails that draped between the buildings. A flock of free-roaming chickens pecked vigorously at an orange that had fallen from a tree before a compost bot rolled along and the chickens fluttered out of its way. The whoosh of a hot air balloon burner sounded above us. Zachariah looked up at the biofueled balloon in surprise. This way. I headed into a shaded corridor where goats chewed on flowers sprouting from the adobe walls. We stepped around some kids who battled two toaster-sized bots and past a barefoot, bearded man playing guitar in a doorway. When the East Farm Tower loomed above us, I asked, "Have you ever been inside a vertical farm?" "Yeah," Zachariah answered. "My high school held detentions at one, you know." "Oh, they do that now? How was that?" The California government ran several large urban farms, a necessity after Central Valley agriculture collapsed. But I hadn't realized they'd been using delinquent youth to staff them. Zachariah shrugged. Pretty easy. Not a wholly negative experience in any case. I suppose that type of community service meant kids were more aware of where their food came from and had opportunities to develop some farming skills, something many of us in the older generation had to learn the hard way. Still, I was grateful the kids of Otra Vida were outside of that system. While there were plenty of reasons one could take issue with the government-run farms, vertical farming had proven to be the best option in our harsh environment. Otra Vida had 4 of them, each a 4-story spiral with a sunflower-shaped rooftop solar array that rotated to collect power throughout the day. Glass outer walls wrapped the top 2 levels, creating a year-round greenhouse. The second level grew grains and greens under pink LED lights. The inner areas were home to more shade-dependent crops like root vegetables and mushrooms, as well as the cricket pens and aquaponics tanks. Whatever went to waste was composted and used to fertilize the new crops. I told Zachariah all of this as we approached, and he nodded along. But once we entered the ground level, which was half kitchen, half miniature processing plant, he looked around in confusion. "Do you have any food allergies?" I asked as I handed him a large glass bowl. He shook his head. I'd been planning to make my favorite sun-baked enchiladas for the potluck tonight, but now I couldn't afford the prep time, so we were both going to have an easy vegetable medley. I plucked an assortment from the rows of baskets and tossed them into each of our bowls, then led Zachariah to the counter. It was already crowded, but people scooted to make room for us. Someone next to me rolled out cricket flour dough. Someone else deboned a tilapia culled from the aquaponics tanks. An inheritor carrying an armful of spinach to restock the bins smiled and waved a leaf at me. "You take what you want and you don't have to pay, right?" Zachariah asked as we chopped beets, zucchini, peas, and tomatoes. "Of course." I reached to the herb garden in the center of the prep table and plucked some rosemary. "What if someone takes all of something?" I glanced back at the overflowing baskets. Honestly, that would be pretty hard to do, and most of what they took would go to waste, so what's the point? Zachariah sawed at a carrot with a serrated knife. Well, what if they don't care and do it anyway? His brow was furrowed, and I couldn't tell if he was concentrating on the carrot or truly baffled by the concept of shared resources. Admittedly, the way we lived took some getting used to for most petitioners. No one gets ahead here by pissing people off.